pag-ibig ba ang higit kaya sa pagkadalisay at pagkadakila gaya ng pag-ibig sa tinupuang lupa? Aling pag-ibig ba wala nang nawala, walang mahalagang hindi inihandog ng may pusong wagas sa bayang nagpupo. Dugo'y yaman dulong, katiis at pagod, buhay mayabuting magkalagot-lagot. Ang nakaraan, panahon ng alim, ang inasahang araw na darating ng pagkatimawa ng mga libing, liban pa sa bayan, saan tatanghalin? Sa abang-abang, mawalay sa bayan, gunita may laging sa bibig ng lumbay, walang alaala at inasamasam, kundi ang makita'y lupang tinupuan. Kayong nalagasan ng bunga't bulaklak, kahoy niya ring buhay na nilantat sukat ng balabalaki, makapal na hirap, muling manariwat, sabay ay lumiyag, ipakahandog-handog ang buong pag-ibig hanggang sa may dugot, ubusing itigis kung sa pagtatanggol buhay ang kapalit. Ito'y kapalaran at tunay na langit. Aling pag-ibig pa ang higit kaya sa pagkadalisay at pagkadakila gaya ng pag-ibig sa tinupuang lupa? Aling pag-ibig pa wala na nga,
Okay, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Welcome sa ating weekly broadcast ng Get to Know Your Nature Party, ang Makakalikasan, ang Nature Party Philippines. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Ako ho si Roy Cabonegro. Ako ang Interim Secretary General ng Makakalikasan. At ito pong ating broadcast ngayong gabi ay live nating binobroadcast din sa ating Facebook at mapapanood ito sa ating YouTube channel pagkatapos nitong paunang live broadcast sa Facebook. Sa gabi po na ito, ang gagamitin po natin na lingwahe sa presentation ay parehong English at Filipino para mas maunawaan tayo ng kapwa natin mga Pilipino at mga hindi Pilipino na maaring interesadong malaman ang tungkol sa ating makakalikasan o ang Nature Party Philippines. Sa mga nakaraang linggo ay inisa-isa natin ang bahagi nitong ating basic orientation patungkol sa makakalikasan. At sa gabi naman po na ito ay gagawin natin ay buo nating ipepresent itong pangkahalatang presentation patungkol sa makakalikasan. Kung kaya't medyo relatively ay mas mahaba itong ating presentation ngayong gabi. So bibigyan po natin ng pagkakataon ang mga maaring nakikinig o kasama natin dito sa broadcast upang magtanong mamaya at magbibigay tayo ng pause sa bawat bahagi o bawat chapter ng presentation upang kung may mga tanong ay pwede tayong mag-question and answer. Gayun din, sa dulo ng buong presentation ay bibigyan din natin ng pagkakataon ng lahat na makapagpahayag o makapagtanong at makapagpalitan tayo ng kuro-kuro. Kung mamarapati ninyo ay isi-shift ko na ngayon itong ang ating presentation sa salitang English at Filipino ang gagamitin natin sa buong presentation. So muli, magandang gabi po at welcome sa ating Get to Know Your Nature Party, ang Makakalikasan o ang Nature Party Philippines. I hope malinaw akong naririnig ng lahat. Shout out natin kay Dr. Nicanor Melesio, Prof. Melesio ng Dagupan City at nandito siya nakikinig sa atin. Yung mga iba ay i-mention natin as they come along sa ating broadcast. Okay, so let me go to our main presentation, which is itong ating overall orientation about makakalikasan. So let me use our slides. Ito po ang ating, this is our logo. Welcome to the Makakalikasan o Nature Party Philippines. Get to Know Your Nature Party Basic Orientation. Independence as a nation for us, as reminded too by the Pilipinas Kalikasan Movement, our partner organization, means we protect, we rehabilitate, we sustainably use for national development, and we conserve our natural resources. Anything less is treason. Magandang reminder ito sa atin sa kasalukuyang panahon. This is a good reminder for us in the current times because there have been many attacks on our national sovereignty and our natural resources. We remind the public that pinapaalalahanan po namin ang publiko na ang makakalikasan ay hindi pula, hindi rin kami bughaw, hindi rin kami dilaw, kami ay luntian para sa komunidad at kalikasan. We're not reds, we're not blue, we're not political yellow, we are greens. We are for the community and the environment. Our presentation will go through a series of 12 points or 12 components from our story to our engagement in the 2022 elections. So bear with us as we go through this relatively long presentation tonight. We will give opportunity for question and answer in between the component presentation to allow for any comments and inquiries and some discussion. At the end of the presentation, we will open it up for statements by everyone who will still be with us. Okay, continuing on. What is our story and our Green Manifesto? From our point of view, we look at the story of green communities from a very early stage during our prehistory or our story. At the early stage of communities in this archipelago, many of them live sustainably. Ang lahat ng katutubo tumubo sa layaw ng inang lupa, or those that are who evolved from these islands, and they enjoyed the benefits and the care of environment where they were in. Let us remind ourselves that some of the terms of our people, the name of our people, still resembles that notion that we are living lives sustainably based on our ecosystem and environment. The Tagalogs is basically a word which means Tagailog, or people of the river. The Maranao are basically Tagaranao. Ranao is lake. Cebu came from the word Sugbo, which means shallow waters. So the people living in the shallow waters, the island with shallow waters, and many, many more. At the age of colonization and industrialization came external influences. The first one is an early stage of Islamization, then early Western colonization, especially the longest one, which is Spanish colonization, a brief American colonization, and a very brief Japanese occupation. In this level of our story, systemic application of the Regalian doctrine over communal systems happened. And together with this, they introduced massive industrialization and natural resource exploitation. Now, also in this stage, the indigenous communities who did not want to adapt to this new way of living uh, came into an age of indigenous peoples isolation. They became isolated. They were either excluded or assimilated. So either you were assimilated and lose your identity, or be excluded. And therefore, there was a process of creating permanent communities in the wilderness. It used to be that communities are in the coastal area or in the lowland where they can till their land, and they were forced by this age of colonization and industrialization to go into hinterlands, and thus came the way indigenous peoples that we know them today. In the early stage of our prehistory, our early ecocentric communities. But in the age of colonization that resulted in the age of indigenous peoples isolation, there was an elitist wealth concentration and control. This is the early stage of anthropocentric community, or human-centric worldview, or living a worldview that is focused on human perspective. During the anti-colonization movement, there were early revolts that eventually led to a national revolution, the pambansang himagsikan ng Katipunan ng mga haring bayan ng mga tumubo sa kapuluan, or the sovereign nation of people who emerged from these lands. And during the liberation liberation during the Japanese and American colonizers, Muslims and the Cordillera revolts against forced annexation to the Republika ng Pilipinas, and the systematic grabbing of territories and resources is also part of this stage. The struggle of indigenous communities to assert their own way of life. During the neo-colonialism and modernization period, which we have emerged from, the current Filipino society emerged from, there was continued exploitation of natural resources to benefit other countries and the local elites. There was extensive development aggression, large dam plantation, and the struggle of the communities, like, for example, the story of Bakling Dulag against Ipo Dam, Chico Dams rather, and other stories. And there was also elite globalization and unsustainable wealth extraction, and no regeneration. We keep on extracting from our resources. And of course, it led to consumerist values and lifestyle, leading to pollution, climate change, and now diseases. And in all these processes, some of us had forced enlightenments, conceptual, but with some action, but maybe not enough. In this stage, there was massive expansion of anthropocentric communities or human-centric communities. We will dwell on that a little bit. And in this current age of environmentalism that began from forced enlightenments of a few, we now have mostly groups that are into advocacy, mostly in advocacy, but many are not yet ready to governance in terms of deep ecologism, which is the next stage of our evolution. Greens of all political shades came to being from the 1970s to the 2000s. We characterize this in Makakalikasan between those that are communitarian by perspective or individualistic by perspective. And we can also use the political spectrum to look at which of these groups are the traditions of the left or are left-leaning in terms of the way they perceive their role and they act on the role, and those that are in the right. The ones in green are would consider political greens. The ones in pink or blue you would consider advocacy greens. And there are greens that are into community work but are isolated from political nor sometimes advocacy work. What's a good point here is that most of these advocacies, as a result of the Green Values Enlightenment, are latent. These are passive actions, which means they have not gone to a point where they enter into the concerns of governance or pamamahala. We view ourselves, mga kalikasan, as belonging to the whole spectrum of left, right, and center. Not left, not right, not center, but all of them. Why do we say that? We say that because, and I will discuss that later in the manifesto, in the process, in the discussion of the manifesto. For now, let's finish our story and look at what are the various greens that we have right now, advocacy and passive deep ecologists, that are now moving into political greens, political communitarian ecocentrism. These greens, various forms of greens, are coming from different experiences, coming from different traditions, the oldest of which would probably be the Philippine Greens, but they are not yet ready to party. They have not been for so many years now. And there are many other groups, Partido Kalikasan, that eventually formed groups in Laguna in Samar, Kaalagad, Task Force Makahalan, Cagayan de Oro, that remains today. There is also Kalikasan People's Network that remains today. And these are the non-traditional, progressive Greens. And we are one of the earliest ones in Makakalikasan. So we are not alone. And of course, there's also Kilusang Luntian, which became the Green Party Philippines, that still exists today. Of course, the traditional parties also form their own Greens. Philippine Greens Republican Party, PGRP, which is a national environmental party, and Luntian Pilipinas party list. And these are formed by traditional politicians, and many of their values we don't share, but they represent the kind of label that we also represent. And all of this may be towards elections 2022, or maybe not, depending on how we are gonna perform in the next few months as we move from passive deep ecologism to political green within communitarian ecocentrism. Let me discuss this further as we discuss our Green Manifesto. Our Green Manifesto states that we are at a global emergency that threatens our very existence as a species. As they say, we have an existential crisis. The destruction of our environment, driven by human actions, is causing climate change, impacting the Philippines faster than and harder than most countries in the world. We are an early onset country, unfortunately. And in fact, even the COVID-19 pandemic, this is a zoonotic viral pandemic. But this is just but a beginning of what is to threaten our very way of life. There are more pandemics coming because this all boils down to the destruction of the habitat of many of our ecosystems. Maharlikans, we use the word Maharlikan to refer to ourselves because the word Maharlikans means free middle class in many of our earlier communities. Filipinos or Maharlikans as citizens of the planet must act on our lifestyles, our social, economic, and political systems towards a green normal. Because of this, because of the call of the times, the country must today be governed by the Greens. It is time. We are confronted with the multiple crises that many of us will not survive. So from the simple washing your hands, social distancing as a response to COVID-19, many of us are unaware that we are already entering into a huge recession, an economic crisis. Right today, the highest unemployment rate in 15 years in the country, and globally, we are now entering a global recession. But the biggest crisis yet is the climate change crisis. We are an early onset country. We're experiencing this earlier than other countries, but this will get worse before it gets better. But the worst is really when biodiversity collapse. And many of us already know that we are now entering into an extinction, a crisis in biodiversity that is causing extinction of many, many species. And this will encompass all of us and will affect our lives and change our lives. We are in a time of multiple crises today. What is a green normal? It is not the normal that we used to be and what we used to do, because those normal is the cause of our problem in the first place. We cannot return to that. The legacy of the normal you will see in this graph. Atmospheric concentration CO2. You see the graph in less than 50 years, it's peak. Ocean acidification, it is peak. The trend is upward. So is energy use upward. So in such a short period of time, global deforestation, it's upward. It's very high. Water use is the same. Fertilizer use is the same. This is the legacy of the normal, and this is causing our problem. Now, when the ECQ happened, our restrictions happened because of the COVID-19. One of the things that most people realize or notice or observe was this picture. It's the same area in Metro Manila, overlooking the watersheds around Metro Manila in the Rizal area. And many did not realize that there were actually a series of mountains at the horizon of Metro Manila until a few weeks after, when there was a slowdown of human consumption, production, and movement because of the restriction. This was an unintended result and realization during the COVID-19 pandemic quarantines and lockdown. So it is, after all, human actions that is driving many of these problems. Now, this is reflected all over the country based on the information as of May 2020 that shows that global consumption, the losses of global consumption amounted to $3.8 trillion, triggering significant job and 47 million full-time equivalent and income, $2.1 trillion losses. Global atmospheric emissions are reduced by 2.5 gigatons of greenhouse in the same period, 0.6 megaton of PM 2.5 and 5.1 metric tons of SOx and NOx. So this is our pollution. So there was a reduction in pollution, reduction in global atmospheric emission. At the same time, losing jobs and lowering of global human consumption. In Asia, Europe, and the US have been the most directly impacted regions. And transport and tourism immediately hit sectors, obviously, because transport was abrupted. The indirect effects of transmitted along international supply chains are being felt across the entire world economy. The ripple effect highlight the intrinsic link between socioeconomic and environmental dimension and emphasize the challenge of addressing unsustainable global patterns. How humanity will react to this crisis will define the post-pandemic world. What we see here is that as human consumption and production lowers the problems that is causing climate change and other environmental problems, the cause of this problem improves. So this is a clear proof that human action is indeed the cause of our many crises today. Now, we were forced by the pandemic situation to realize this across the world. Now, when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals during the period of the pandemic last year, and I suppose continuing this year, the report said that COVID-19 had negatively affected several goals, including poverty, hunger, good health and well-being, decent work, and reduce inequalities. But at the same period, some of the other SDG, consumption, production, climate action, life below water, life on land, where there was immediate relief or an improvement in this SDG. What does this mean? We have to understand that the SDG is composed of three parts: people agenda, planet agenda, and profit agenda. What that graph shows is that as the profit people and profit agenda were reduced, the planet agenda improved. And this is again another proof that indeed human action is directly related to improvement or the destruction of ecosystems in our environment. A green normal is the question whether human action also would lead to a new normal, one that will not continue the legacy or the root causes of our problem. In Mahakalikazan, we believe that a green normal may be described with having three basic elements: sustainability, where the slowdown of human consumption, production, and movement will become an accepted norm. But it is also about regeneration, where meaningful localized living will pave way for habitats and biodiversity to be revived, and planetary health and well-being, where we act and measure human health and well-being only as part of the overall condition of the living planet. So not just human health, but looking at our health in relation to the health of the planet. Sustainability as we know it is dead, says the innovation group of J. Walter Thompson. Doing less harm is no longer enough. The future of sustainability lies in regeneration, seeking to restore and replenish what we have lost to build economies and communities that thrive and that allow for the planet to thrive too. And therefore, we have come to realize that green normal must be defined along sustainability, regeneration, and planetary health. Well, planetary health, as I mentioned, is realizing that human health is not separated from planetary health, and therefore we must learn to assess and act on actions for human health in relation to the health of the planet. Why is this? Because many environmental problems directly damages human health. And in this shift to a green normal, there are key questions that we need to ask. One, how do we transform worldviews and narratives to enable the redesign of human impact on Earth? Two, how do we nurture skill linking health and resilience through building capacity for local and bioregional participation? Three, how do we design as nature as we transform to regionally circular biomaterial economies? And finally, four, how do we increase planetary bioproductivity and improve healthy ecosystems and functions? These are the key questions that needs an ideological shift in order to fully appreciate and move towards what we call a green normal. Now, at this point, before we go into the discussions of our ideology, if some of you have questions, you could kindly just post it in our chat here, or even later after the video or during the video, you can post it in our chat and we'll try to respond to them as soon as possible in order to start dialogue on this part of the presentation. So let me go back to our presentation. We are now on the ideology of Makakalikasan. We describe our ideology as deep communitarian ecologism. In the Filipino language, we have found an appropriate term for this, the concept of pagbubuuhagi ng makakalikasang pamayanang Maharlikano. I've already explained what Maharlikan is. Pagbubuuhagi, the word buuhagi is a term that we use coming from two words, buo at bahagi, and we will explain that in a bit. The best way to explain the worldview, the ideology of Makakalikasan, is to look at the two worldviews that are opposed to each other. One is our current worldview, which is anthropocentric, where when you look at in relation to other life forms that we share the planet with, we look at the human beings as on top, the most important. It is the predominant. Its well-being is utmost compared to others. And down at the bottom are many other life forms as you go along. Now, even across human beings, there is also inequity here because most often than not, these are male-dominated human beings societies. So men are dominating above women in these types of worldview. And this is what you call anthropocentric. In Filipino concept, we have what you call taas at baba. Merong nasa taas, ibig sabihin merong nasa baba. There are people on top, which means there are people below. And people below are supporting whoever it is on top. And the ones on top are a few, and the ones below are many as you go down the line. The other worldview is ecocentric, or a worldview looking at the role of human beings as just merely a part of the other life forms that we share this planet with. We have found the appropriate term in Filipino culture in the word buo at bahagi, or what we call buuhagi, coined by Aurelio C. Reyes, uh, who's already not with us, no, he's deceased. Ed Aurelio Reyes, no, he's the one who coined the word buuhagi or buo at bahagi. Now, this shows us that human beings is just part, and the parts constitute the whole. The importance of the whole belongs to its part. There cannot be a whole without a part. Buo at bahagi. As compared to merong nasa taas, what's on top and what's below. The pyramid and the circular. Ang ecologism na ideolohiya ng makakalikasan ay laban or against anthropocentric values. Ang tao ang pinakamataas o pinakamahalaga. Pabor naman siya. It favors ecocentric values. Ang tao ay bahagi lang ng ekolohiya ng buhay na planeta. It favors people being only part of ecology, of other living beings that we share this planet with. Therefore, the elements of ecologism is against individualism and for communitarianism, the concern of the community, but not just the community of people, but the community of life forms. Now, it's important to go back to the spirit of the Katipunan ideology when they coined the term Haring Bayan, or sovereign people, or the power or the authority of the sovereign, the most powerful being the people. And this is not just the concept does not stand alone as just a concept of sovereign people, but it goes hand in hand with who is the sovereign people. The sovereign people ay ang mga taong tumubo mula sa kapuluang ito. And ang tumubo means that which came from the land or the ecosystem. So its relationship with its ecosystem where it evolved in our islands. And in this case, the key words that describe this kind of sovereign people that are free and enlightened and understand the relationship with environment, what we have is the word Maharlikano, in Bisaya, Timawa, and many other words that represent the same. These are free, dignified, marangal, malaya ng mga tao na tumubo mula sa kalupaan. These are free people, ethical people, free, that evolve, that understands their role, their part as they evolve in the land or the ecosystem. Ang tinubuang lupa o inang lupa, malinaw ang kaginhawaang nararanasan dahil sa malinaw ang koneksyon ng tao sa kanyang ekosistema. The concept is that as they evolve from the land, as they recognize that they evolve from the land and the ecosystem, they understand their relationship with the ecosystem and the benefits and the care and benefit that they have in this positive relationship. And we have to remind ourselves again that the name we attribute ourselves as people in different places still reminds us of this relationship. Tagalog, ang mga Tagalog, Taga-Ilog are people of the river. Kapampangan ay tao sa Pampang o people of the coast. Sugbo or Cebu, tao sa mababaw na dalampasigan or shallow waters, people of the shallow water. Laguna de Bae is tao sa lawa. Lawa means lake, people of the lake. Maranao, tao sa lawa, or Ranao, mga tao sa lake, people of the lake. And many, many more. Okay, ecologism as an ideology cannot be limited, cannot be pinpointed as either left or right. Why? Because at certain stage of its ideology, it is both left and right. What is clear is that this is not about individualistic or individualism, but communitarianism, and much more beyond community of people, but community of human beings in relation to other life forms, the community of life. Now, Mahakalikazan is left when we push ecosystemic change to achieve sustainability, like closed-loop systems in social, economic, political systems. So indeed, we are left in that context when we're aiming for systemic change. We are also right because Mahakalikazan, when we push habitat and biodiversity conservation to achieve regeneration, we want things to remain as they are, the way it is. And therefore, we are also right. But we are also centered because we want to mainstream current successes at a scale needed to solve our ecological crisis. We must be centered in government. We must claim state resources and authority because the problem that we have that we need to confront in our current existential crisis requires such. And therefore, we cannot say that we are neither left, right. We are not left, we are not right, we are not center, we are all of them, but we are for the community and the environment. Our unifying principles emanating from this worldview can be summed up into four. Ecological wisdom. In Filipino, likaskayang kaunlaran. Ecological wisdom in development. Number two, social justice and grassroots democracy. Hustisyang panlipunan at pinatubong demokrasya. Ang demokrasya mula sa bahagi papuntang kabuuan. Active nonviolence, ang mapayapang aktibong pagkilos, and personal and collective integrity in governance or integridad sa pamunuan. The principles guide us in choices that we make in terms of our political action and political agenda, and in institutions and organizations and communities that we create. I'd like to repeat, we are unified by the principles of ecological wisdom in development, social justice and grassroots democracy, active nonviolence, and personal and collective integrity in governance. Okay, so again, I'd like to check if there are questions that have been raised in any of the parts of the presentation. So having read none, I will continue. So let me just recognize some of the comments here. So let me show them here. So Danilo Dumpas said, "Copy sir, mahina lang signal ko dito." Thank you, Danilo, for joining us. And Niels Gyokads said, "Watching now." Good. So just keep on watching, and if you have comments, just post it here as we try to learn as much as we can and what Makakalikasan is all about. Okay, so going back to the presentation, let me proceed with the platform of governance or the green agenda of the party. Now, many have asked us about this, so we have come up with specific slides to understand each of our green agenda. Of the many agenda that we are confronted with, the party Mahakalikazan has chosen to concentrate our work on 15 very very important that we recognize as priority green agenda. They are summarized here. You can view it in our website, and that is the link to the website. But we are going to go through them one by one, although we will not detail each one. We will have a separate session in the next few weeks, every Sunday, to the next 15 weeks, starting next Sunday, to concentrate on each of these political agenda. But let me go through it in simple bullets so people will have a clear understanding of what we stand for. Okay, before I go to the 15-point agenda, we need to be reminded that across all of this, we stand for the most vulnerable people and sectors in our society that requires equitable redistribution of wealth and opportunities. We recognize that these people, sector, and vulnerable groups require priority. Indigenous, Bangsamoro, and the Cordillera peoples, marginalized peasants, homeless urban poor, women, children, senior citizens, and single parents in difficult circumstances and situation, persons with disability, persons deprived of liberty, and victims of gender-based violence. First agenda is climate and public health emergency actions. Priority, recovery from the current COVID-19 pandemic, prepare for the succeeding pandemic, adapt to the impacts of climate change by utilizing ecosystem-based solution, mitigate to lifestyle changes, changes in social, economic, and political governance system, and adopt a planetary health framework and declare a national climate emergency calamity in order to bring the priority actions needed to confront climate and public health emergency today. Renewable energy. Our stand is a swift shift to renewable energy within a decade. Immediately, this means no more coal and diesel power plants. We will always oppose new coal and diesel power plants for the country. We want the country to shift to renewable energy 100% within a decade. We must find a way, not only because it will be good for our environment, but this will give us an advantage as the rest of the world shifts into renewable energy. Shift infrastructure development for green industries and services nationwide, which includes a nationwide electric mass transportation system, and shift to the use of renewable materials in mass social housing and public works. We must find alternative materials for our mass housing and public works because the current materials that we use are simply causing many of our problems and destruction in the habitats. We are also for 100% shift to organic agriculture in the next decade, with preference towards plant-based food systems within a decade. We are also for a preferential support for improving value chain of small farmers and fisher folks. And we are for local food systems, including mass home and community gardening. In biodiversity and habitat conservation, we want to move within a decade to recover, to reforest 40% of our land area in major islands. We are currently at 11% nationwide. We have to enforce strictly conservation laws. We have many laws, but we lack strong enforcement. One of the things you can do on protected areas is to develop the corridoring approach in order to make these protected areas broader and linked to each other so that there will be better ways of managing them. And in the process, and recognizing that there are people living in these forest areas and in these ecosystems, we use agroforestry and aquasil approach to reforestation. So not just pure reforestation, but a socio-economic approach that recognizes the needs and reality that there are communities living in the forest. We need to also have a nationwide propagation of bamboo for reforestation and as a renewable material for building constructions, I mentioned earlier in an earlier agenda. And we need to prioritize water source or the water quality management area for freshwater security. On ecological economics, the party thinks that we need to go to mixed agro-industrial service circular economy, having with zero waste as our vision and minimizing waste as much as possible, including strong enforcement of eco-waste and pollution law, and the passage and implementation of a phase out in our industries of plastics, in our industries and commercial products. So eventual phase out of the of use of plastics across our industry and commercial products. We would also support MSME, micro, small, medium enterprises for green jobs generation, alternative green value exchange such as barter, local green currencies, and other forms of green value exchange, and reintegration of BPO workers. These are the call centers to support local green agro industries and services. So instead of servicing other countries, to try to reintegrate them for use in our own development of agro industries and services. And of course, the gradual introduction of a universal basic pay system for our workers. For deurbanization and greening communities, the party is for the reduction of our current urban population to 30% in a decade. Green collectives or communes in rural development may be formed in order to facilitate the transfer of many communities, of many individuals and families and communities to rural areas or suburban areas. Green communities in urban, rural, suburban with green technology, home solar, biodigesters, home gardening, rainwater collection, green parks, bike commuting delivery systems, etc. And we want to incentivize the use of non-concrete construction and move to more renewable materials for construction such as bamboo and others. Number 7, and one of the biggest of our agenda, it's in the middle of our agenda at the number 7, is to reclaim national resource patrimony. The party believes that our national resource patrimony is under massive attack and we must reclaim it. We are for the renationalization of oil gas development, especially Liguasan Marsh and Recto Bank, Palawan, and Liguasan Marsh in Central Mindanao. We are for the renationalization and the re-cooperativization of key public utilities from the now privatized public utilities of freshwater and electricity. And we are for the moratorium on all mineral mining and quarrying for a decade while we rationalize utilization of minerals for our own development. In particular, in quarrying, what this means is that we need to find alternatives to construction and road public works, the materials used here, if we are to push this moratorium for the next decade. And we want to develop viable renewable alternatives to resource, as I've mentioned, that we currently need from mineral mines and quarry, including recycling and upcycling. Now, we have to confront population growth. And in this agenda, we are committing to providing sufficient access to sexual and reproductive health options and services, to individuals and couples in order to manage their family, the size of their family. The government must also incentivize couples who will commit not to have biological children of their own, or and instead opt for adoption of abandoned and orphaned children, or having at least one of their two children from adoption. So we will incentivize, but of course we cannot. We are not for absolute population control, but we want government to incentivize couples who may choose not to have their own biological children and instead adopt orphaned and abandoned children, or at least one of their two uh, child to come from adoption. This will solve many social problems that we have because we also have a growing number of abandoned and orphaned children. And this will also allow us to manage humanely the reduction of our population growth. Number nine, we support that we want to ensure the self-determination of the different peoples of our country. And in this case, when we say peoples, we mean the indigenous people, the Bangsamoro, and the Cordillera peoples. We are for the immediate completion of the recognition of indigenous people's right to their ancestral lands and domain. Within 1 year, finish all the completion of recognition of their CADT, certificates of ancestral domain titles. This has long been overdue. And more than that, we are for the full support to the implementation of their ADS-TPP, or their development plan, ancestral domain strategic development protection plan. And we believe that it's not enough that we help them develop this plan. The state, the government must support the implementation of this ADS-TPP. After all, they control large tracts of critical lands and territories, lands and water, and they are Filipinos, and they are in the best position to do their development in a sustainable way. We are also for the full support of the BARM law and the full autonomy of the Cordillera. We say no to all out war against rebellions, and instead we push for the final resolution of all peace negotiation with rebel groups, leading to the withdrawal of all armed groups, military, rebels, from ancestral domains, Barm and Cordillera territories, leading to their own self-defense force to secure their own territories. We are for all of these conflicts to move out from these territories of the three peoples: indigenous people, the Cordillera, and the Bangsamoro, to allow them to assert their own self-determination, but in the process of the full completion of peace negotiation. Instead of all-out war, we will go for all-out peace. Number 10, we are for reforms in governance, and in our particular case, we will support the eradication of graft and corruption in government. This is very important. We need to pass and implement an anti-dynasty law. We will subsidize through public financing political parties in order to create equitability across political parties, and in also to make them more accountable. We are for the reform of our penal and justice system to decongest and make our penal facilities more humane. We have a major problem with our penal system, and this is one of the nagging human rights issue of a country that we need to respond to. We also want the foreigner greening of our constitution by including the right to environment in the right of nature clauses as a part of this constitution. And we want to optimize the local government code, and if not sufficient, after much process of optimization, the shift to federal parliamentary form of government to give local communities more control over their environment and natural resources, which means we are for change in the constitution to allow for a federal parliamentary form, but this has to evolve from first the full optimization of the current local government code. Only after all of it has been optimized will we support any move for the change of the constitution. And in such change, we are for a shift to federal parliamentary form of government for the purpose of, among others, to give local communities more control over their environment and natural resources. On one of the new agenda of the party are this agenda. Some of these agenda include sustainable national financing. In the past, we didn't have this, but we realized the importance of this, and so we have included this as part of our green agenda. Now, what does this entail? One, we will not go for new national borrowing for a decade. We will stop borrowing within a decade. Instead, we will plug leaks in procurement system, raise funds from the renationalization of oil, gas, and public utilities, as previously discussed in an earlier agenda. And we will redirect remittances of OFWs and BPO workers' savings to investments in green jobs, green agro-industries, and services. We will reduce income and value added tax, VAT and income tax, but we will increase direct tax to pollutive and unhealthy industries, including a carbon tax. We believe in this way we will be able to raise the necessary funds without having to borrow more loans within a decade. It's also important that we look at our research and development, education, and artistic expression of sustainability. Therefore, within this agenda, we will increase by 500% yearly for 10 years the research and development budget. We will support local inventors and creatives to develop new sustainable technologies and innovation and artistic expression to better communicate sustainability and the values of sapat. Sapat is a very important value for Filipinos because it means neither that there should be too many or that there should be people who will not have enough. There should be sapat, the middle ground. Refocus education towards sustainability and regenerative principles as our green normal dictates. Knowledge, skills, and values, and applying them directly into solving local green issues and concerns. This is what we call community problem solving learning. Our education must solve community problems. It must be refocused that way. In terms of security and international affairs, um, the the Mahakalikassan believes that it's important to look at Southeast Asia security solidarity. We want to decrease dependence from our mutual defense pact with Western allies. Not give them up entirely, but decrease them and instead strengthen Southeast Asian security solidarity in tandem with building our complementary military defensive capacity. Complementary meaning we need to look at what other countries have in Southeast Asia and offer a complementary military defensive capacity as we promote security solidarity across the region. And in this process, instead of military conflicts within the region, we will pursue joint exploration and conservation for future sustainable use of all disputed territories among Southeast Asian neighbors. Number 14, second to the last. We also have an agenda to sustainably reintegrate our overseas Filipino workers. 10% of Filipinos are already working abroad. This is a huge number, and its socio-economic and its social cost is high. We want to provide technical and financial incentives to facilitate the return of at least 75% of OFW within a decade, with investment mechanisms in green agro-industrial and services enterprise, in green collectives or communes. So while they are working abroad, we already create opportunities here for them so that they can invest, so that when they come back, when they're enticed to come back, they will have they will be investing and have viable businesses in green collectives and communes here in the country. This is also a way to finance these green collectives and communes as we move for the urbanization, green cities, and the urbanization. We will reunite families of OFW as a strategy to reduce demand-side factors contributing to drug abuse, juvenile delinquency, and teenage pregnancy. This is the social cost that I mentioned earlier, and it's so important that we do this in order to reduce demand-side factors for these many social ills. Now, we will also support global climate justice agenda, the leadership of this in the world, because the country has taken specific roles in this in the past, and we have lost our initiatives on this, and it's important still that we play this role in the global community. So we will support the Philippine delegation's leading roles in global demands for climate justice, in particular demand for loss and damages, for early onset of climate change impact, as well as consistent implementation of our own commitment to the recent Paris Agreement on global climate actions. This includes our adaptation plans, NAMA, and our NDC, nationally determined contributions to the Paris Climate Agreement. Okay, so let me go through the chat again to check if more people have commented or have made any questions. We encourage everyone to post your question here or to let me know if you have, and we can pause and discuss some of your concerns. Now, having read none, I will proceed. It's already 1 hour, and I suppose there will be another hour to finish the entire presentation. Okay, so moving along, let me go through the strategic plan. We have a long-term plan, which is a 8-year plan for building this party, and I will briefly go through some of the points here for you to understand where we want to go. Our vision is a sustainable Philippine environment and society in a sustainable planet Earth. It's both a global vision and a vision for the country. We want to establish a national green political party that mainstreams green political ideology and governance in the country. Our goals in the next 8 years are the following: 2.8 Filipinos becoming members of the party in at least 50 provinces nationwide and 5 countries for Filipinos abroad, 50 elected positions held by the party, regardless of what level of political position this is, but elected positions within 8 years. And as a way to demonstrate the participation of individual member parties in actual direct conservation, our members will have a hand at reforesting at least 3,000 hectares of forest protected and rehabilitated. Our mantra, the one that should remind us of what we represent, is the phrase, "Makakalikasan pamamahala." And that's the reason why it appears on the lower right of our presentation. We need to constantly be reminded that when you sum up this vision, mission, goal, what we want is a makakalikasang pamamahala. In English, it means green governance. Forest Protection Party. We want to be known as a forest protection party. There are many environmental issues. In fact, most important to the Philippines and archipelagic countries, really coastal and marine. But forest is an iconic symbol. It is what people see. And you talk about environmental protection, to have a clear recall of what you are and what you represent, it boils down to how we are able to protect and conserve our forest. We therefore aim to be known as a forest protection political party using the strategic goals that I have outlined earlier. Okay, let me go through it in detail. Why 2.8 million members? As our government structure is skewed in favor of a very powerful executive, that is how our system is designed and our laws are designed, the strategic target for optimal reform in the state is really the presidency. No other position is most important at this point. Unless our constitution is changed, this will remain the same. However, while recognizing that the presidency is the utmost target for any major change, major reforms, our elections, we also know, is constantly rigged. The only way around it is landslide victory. If there are so much votes then regardless of any effort at rigging it, the expression of democracy, what the voters will express, will still be the one that will come out regardless of any effort at rigging the election. If it is a landslide victory, based on the past two presidential elections, a landslide victory for the president is between 14 to 16 million votes. During the convey a maximum of 5 other to vote favoring his or her choice. This is a fact from studies that were made recently, and therefore the best way to really target a 14 to 16 million vote or the lower end of 14 million is really to have 2.8 million members actively campaigning, convincing 5 other person each. And this will total 14 million for a possible landslide victory during an appropriate presidential election. Unfortunately, this is not the 2022 election. It is too early for us. What we are targeting is the 2028 presidential election, 8 years from now. We are also targeting 50 provincial chapters and 5 country chapters for OFWs and 50 elected positions held. If we are to be a truly grassroots national party, we must have presence in at least 50% of all communities. In the initial stages, it may be viable to target more than half of our provinces. We have 82 provinces. 50% plus 1 is 42. Thus, around 50 is a good target for setting up and maintaining local chapters. As a political organization, when we form chapters locally, our strength lies in our capacity to capture and hold on to elected positions. Thus, what good is a chapter if it has no even singular position that it has won for one of its candidates? Therefore, we each chapter in the 50 chapters that we're targeting must be able to target and win one position. That's one position, like one local position, like a government barangay captain or a national district congressman in all chapters. And this is where the 50 elected position comes in. Now, our conservation target that will allow us to be known as a forest protection party is targeting a very minimal 3,000 hectares of forest protected and rehabilitated. Again, forests are iconic symbol, and it's important to be able to do work here so that people understand what we stand for. Our ability to prove we have an internal capacity to reforest this much will be a proof of our resolve. This is viable if you consider that even if only half of all chapters, say 25 or 50, will cover 1.6 hectares per month, or every month for 6 years, we will be able to reach this target by 2027. So the basic target is 1.6 hectares per month per half of the chapters. In 6 years, we will be able to reach 3,000 hectares of forest protected and rehabilitated. Okay, so before we proceed with the green strategies, again, I'm gonna check if there are new people who have commented. Okay, none, so I'm gonna proceed with the presentation. Okay, strategies. How do we do this? How do we do this differently? And how do we do this effectively? We have 10 things that we want to do differently. Okay, let me try to, this will be a subject of another presentation. So what I'm gonna give here is just a rundown. There are 10 things that we want to do differently. One, we want to be mass membership led and funded. We must have real members on the ground, as many as possible, 2.8 million. And the members must be the ones who will fund the party. In this way, the control of the party also emanates from the members. If we will allow a few individuals of vested interest to have more say on funding the party and thus becoming most likely our candidates, just like how other traditional political parties go, we will not make any difference. We have to make difference by doing things differently, and this is one of them. Number two, endorsement of other candidates or coalitions will be subject to a green rating and a green covenant process. We do not endorse simply because it's strategic for us. It must be based on a rating. We must choose them because they have done or plan to do appropriate actions consistent or supportive of our green agenda. And there must be a green covenant process. There must be an agreement between us and them that they will pursue this agenda with us. We do not allow guest candidate except in a coalition, except if we enter into a coalition. Guest candidate meaning candidates that run under our name but are not our members. This is a no-no because we want to be honest in our candidate selection coming from our own membership. And therefore, the only candidates that will represent us are those that we choose from within our membership, except when we enter into a coalition and subject ourselves to the common rules of selecting candidates agreed upon at the coalition level. We also have a unique process for selecting candidates. This is what you call the green primary election process. The primary election is a process that happens in two levels. One, a open public process where the general public, even those that are not members, can join in the selection process. And the candidates may or may not be party members. This will allow us to get the pulse of the community and come out with names and individuals who may be potential to be recognized as a potential green candidate. But the second part of the green primary election process is limited to the party members, and then the candidates who will be part of this election process can only remain as candidate if he or she chooses to become party members. So this will give a chance to those who are not yet decided to be parties to eventually become party member, but already given the highlight of what it will take for them to win in an election. Because in a way, in a lot of ways, this green primary election is a kind of a political survey, but done through actual voting of people in the selection of candidates. So these two steps, green primary election process, is to allow for the community and our members to actively be part of a process to select candidates. Now, the fourth mechanism is a parallel government or whole government approach. Now, a parallel government approach is where we, in our chapters, create assignments for individuals to be assigned to monitor specific elected government officials. So, one in the provincial level, for example, and the provincial level structure of the party, one leader of the party will be assigned to monitor the governor of that province. His or her job is to monitor daily what's happening in this politician and to keep the party abreast. This way, and if we do this across all the government structures elected and appointed, we will be able to have a direct way of monitoring what's happening in governance. The logic being that if we are to become government, we must be able to understand what government is currently doing, monitor it, and be ready to support it when things are appropriate, and to critique it and to replace it when it is necessary. And we can only do that if we understand what's happening in government. So we need to create a sort of a shadow government approach, paralleling, putting in parallel each government official to our own leaders. And each of these leaders will prepare themselves, will mind shift themselves into understanding those roles of the elected or appointed government. And we cannot have a party simply whose job is only political and electoral. This is not a reality in the country, and therefore we must link up with other partner groups. Later, I'll explain some of this partnership in order to offer and provide socioeconomic and, as I mentioned earlier, conservation activities actions and targets for the party. So being a party member should also result to socio-economic and conservation benefit and not just political benefit. Number 6, standard. Within the core that will allow for internal monitoring of party discipline and standards among party members and structures. So these are quality circle standards that whose job is to ensure that everyone follows our internal rules and we can impose party discipline across the party. Number 7, autonomous successor generation representation. We have a youth wing, Kabataang Makakalikasan or KM. However, they are not organic to the party. They are an independent group, but they have automatic representation in all assemblies, in all structures of the party, but we do not dictate upon them. This is important in order to allow the next generation their own autonomy to decide on their own, to learn from their own, but at the same time be given the appropriate responsibility and opportunity in leadership role in the party. This is unique to Mahakalikassan as other political party view their youth wing as an organic part of their political party. We, on the other hand, do not. But we make an effort to make sure that there is required representation across all party structures and mechanism for young people to be properly represented through their own autonomous kabataang makakalikasan. We also have, number 8, we also have a people's whole tribe approach to chapter building ancestral domain. What this means is that we do not enter ancestral domains or territories of peoples, like Zamora, Cordillera, Indigenous peoples, tribes, and build chapters that may have the impact of divide these communities. What we do is we offer membership to the party, to the tribe as a whole, to the community as a whole, or whole tribe approach, using their own mechanism for deciding as a community. We will offer that decide as a whole, but we will not try to create and impose our own party structures within over and above or within their own mechanism, as this has the tendency to disrupt their own internal mechanism. So, for example, for the Dumagat tribes in Rizal, we will not create chapters within this area that will only cover some members of the party. It must be the whole party within the whole tribe that will have to be asked if they want to join the party as a whole and to be governed by their own mechanism. And it is the party who will adjust to this mechanism in order to reflect our respect for their right to self governance and and ensure that the integrity of their communities are maintained, even in political participation through the party. Number 9, communitarian deep ecologism. I have discussed this in much content earlier, and this is really what we call the green normal approach. In a while, I'll go back to this discussion of the green normal. Let me backtrack to this a bit and try to go back to some of the slides, which I think we skipped on the green normal approach. I don't recall having gone through it when we went. No, I already did, no, in the discussion. Number 10 is really rebuilding ecocentric parts towards a whole nation. The idea here is that if we are to be a strong nation, we must look at the parts, and only in the strengths of the parts will we be able to see a strong whole. Now, if you use this perspective, which is the essential buuhagi concept of our communitarian ecologism ideology, it is not just an ideology, but it should also be a framework for our strategy formulation as we move along implementation. Now, while we push all of this, what are the practical responses while we work for political change? We must move initiative the entire life of an individual or a community or a family. We would like to create a mechanism by which all these services can be provided to party members and party supporters. This one is in a form of, say, one of the easiest way to explain this is One is really a online disaster action, eco social net, eco games, eco governance, eco arts, eco legacies, eco volunteering, and this system, these various forms of things that we need on daily basis, will pull together a resource and make it available for others. And a common platform would be an online app, a lifestyle app, green normal app. An example, for example, is a green normal healthcare delivery program. No? We have piloted this, and this is an online pharmacy, 30 to 50% less on generic medicine delivered for free, an online doctor consultation, an online medical consultation and test for geographically difficult areas, production and processing support to community herb gardens for generic medicine, environmental health monitoring and actions as key to proactive public health policies and programs, all in one system. This will support lowering movement because these are online, production, consumption, because we are trying to integrate it at a local level, and we will offer viable practical needs of individuals and communities and families. To develop, but the idea is we will offer socio-economic and conservation services along a lifestyle option for everyone, particularly our members and supporters. Okay, so let me check again if there are any comments and suggestions, reaction. Baka nakatulog na kayo. Medyo mahaba-haba pa. Okay, so proceeding. Besides this 8-year plan, we have a longer term plan, at an 11-year plan, which describes the entirety of our development as a party. Now, we look at this year, last year, and this year until 2022 as a formative stage. At this stage, we are in the process of organizing the party, securing legal personality as a national party with an accreditation from Commission on Election, and an initial bid in the next national local election, May 2022, if we can. We anticipate that our engagement in the election will be driven by tactical consideration, possibly aiming to win at least one national position while establishing ourselves a critical local position. We'll get back to that at the last part of the presentation. In 2022 to 2023, after the next election, we see it as a foundational stage for the party. At this stage, we will support the participation of local chapter members in the anticipated October 2022 Barangay SK election, which is very, very important to us, very local, and to consolidate all local chapters from the levels of the city, town to barangays and schools and communities. So this is our initial stage of a real consolidation across a broad number of chapters nationwide in this period. In 2023 to 2026, as we go through the 2025 election and beyond, a year after the 2025, as the stage, we look at this as our main developmental stage, where we will really grow. At this stage, we will institutionalize all party leadership programs to professionalize our ranks. This will also be the stage where we will seriously engage local election, city, town, province, district in 2025. And any gains from the 2022 and 2025 elections will be supported at this point. If you are successful in getting some elected positions, the priority will be to support the incumbency, whoever wins, and make sure each of these green politicians toe the party line, and ensure party discipline to start achieving our green agenda. This will be the stage we will be start implementing to our elected positions. So definitely we want to be a party that wins candidate in order to implement our green agenda. The full maturity of the party may come from the period of 2025 within 2028 elections and beyond 2028 election, a period of implementation right after 2028 presidential election. At this stage of the party, we will fully consolidate our national structures and mechanisms and prepare to win a full slate of local and national positions as well as the presidency in 2028. Whatever gains we achieve, there must be fully supported and ensure that majority, if not all, of our green agenda are fully implemented nationwide up till 2031. So the reckoning of our success is really what we have done by 2031. By the way, this is consistent with the challenge that in the next 10 years, from 2020 to 2030, is the period where we can still make a difference globally in the current existential problem that we have on climate change. It has been noted by many experts that by 2050, the problems of the environment on climate change will not only be irreversible, but it will be large scale. Right now, what we are feeling are the early onset, including what we're feeling, what impacts us in the Philippines. We have the next 20 years, 10 years to 20 years, 2020 to 2030 and 2040, but most likely 2030 to make any difference, to make any substantial difference. If not, by 2050, the impacts would be large scale, and not only will it be irreversible, it will start to really affect many lives of people and communities. Some more than others, including our own country. So we are doing this consistent with this timeline in confronting the challenge of our existential problem of climate change and environmental destruction. Okay, so simply put, how do we form this party? We have created these 10-point steps. Easy to remember, hard to do, we know, but we will try our best. Setting up interim councils and appointment of local conveners started last year until this month. Hopefully, we will be able to complete our councils and local conveners, forming our conveners. Number two, we will convene online regional assemblies and national assembly. This has been extended already to about May or April. So there will be an ongoing online regional and national assembly in order to formalize the party in the next few months until May or April. Step 3, file the petition for accreditation. Originally March, we might move this to something like May or at the latest June, half of the year. We will continue to expand and strengthen all local chapter in step 4 and start to select candidate in 2021 for 2022 using our Green People's Primary election process, which I described earlier. And once petition is approved by COMELEC, hopefully this year, we will be able to get this petition approved. We will start to formalize the party structure. For now, we are organizing informally because we are not yet a registered political party. If petition is not approved, the consensus is that we will still continue as an informal organization and form a non-profit for political activity so we can continue to operate in party building while the party registration is still being waited upon. We may want to consider formalizing the Makakalikasan Center as a political center, as a non-party registered organization that will allow us to still operate in the stages of building this party. We are now in the process of registering the Makakalikasan Center as a non-profit political center to support the party with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Step 6, and this will be the second series of assemblies. The assumption here is we're already registered and we can now proceed with selecting our candidates in the second leg, the member-only leg of the Green People's primary election. Step 7 is the submission of nomination and petition to participate in the 2022. Step 8 is when we prepare already for the election in 2022, campaigning and organizing the chapters for electoral campaigning. So we'll move from party building to electoral campaigning mode. And of course, electoral campaign period of January to April. And during step 10 is the actual election and the days following the election in order to ensure that our votes are counted properly. Okay, so we are now at the discussion of our operational plan. Let me take a look at comments. If there are any. If none, I will proceed. Okay. So, go to the detail of the operation plan. But we do have a clear plan for the next 3 years, 2020 to 2022. And let me go through the main targets. To be accredited, to form chapters in 42 provinces to 50. Tactically engage in 2022 election. The last part of this presentation will dwell on this. We will support members who will engage the anticipated 2022 SK and Barangay Election in 50 barangays. So that's clearly one of our targets. To pilot a reforestation or conservation target in 10% of our target, which is 30 hectares from the 3,000 hectares. So 1% of our target of the 3,000 hectares that we want. For the next 2 years, we will develop the first 1% of that for 30 hectares. And our financial target is about 7.5 million to be raised in order to allow us to engage in the 2022 national and local election. So we have a large fundraising target this year. Okay, I will not dwell into the details. I just want to show you that these plans are real and we are serious about these plans. That's why we have came up with this very detailed operations plan. What I want to show you is at the end of it, we need 7.2 million. That is also our fundraising target. Now, how will we raise this? We will raise this in this way, as I mentioned in the strategy. Most of our funds will be driven by membership. That's the reason why membership dues and membership contribution at the bottom represents the biggest chunk, 61%. And project grants, mid-range sponsorship, 15%. Crowdsourcing campaign, 15%. And large donation, relatively large amount from small number of people, 10%. So this is the design of our fundraising scheme. So again, consistent with our strategy that it must be driven by membership support and membership control. And therefore, membership control. Implementing, that is why we have a very clear monitoring and evaluation system with clear chain of results to show what outcomes, what input, what output we want to happen. So these are consistent with what I have discussed earlier in terms of how we are targeting our goals. Now, when we go to the operation and organization, briefly, I want to update you that our target is 42 to 50 provincial chapter in 2 years, and 210 to 250 city-town chapters. This is our target for the next 2 years until end of 2022. Right now, we are in 10 regional council. We have council leaders in 10 regions. We haven't formed our provincial chapters yet. And in terms of city-town chapters, we're currently 24 nationwide. So that's about 10% of our target of 250 city-town. At the beginning of the year, in this 2-year period, we are starting with a 10% accomplishment already by the first quarter. Not bad, but we are a long way from reaching our target. Now, in terms of party organization, again, as I mentioned, there are online regional assembly. There will be a online National Assembly until April. We will continue with the Green Normal Summit, but we will have to reschedule this. This is the process to form that socioeconomic support that I described earlier as practical benefits that members and supporters will enjoy by being part of the party. So we'll be forming that online system of many services. And we will have online local town assembly to formalize the chapter latter part of this year, especially when we get our accreditation from COMELEC. And we will run our primary election, green primary election, people's primary election to choose our candidate. And we will run the second assembly and first electoral convention by September or October, in time for submitting our petition to run and our certificates of candidacy for 2022 by end of October, which is the deadline of COMELEC. So all of this is planned in a way that we can participate in 2022. Our party organization can be described in two approach. One is focus organizing because we are building local chapters. And also we go for alliance work, building to the existing groups in the form of the Green Normal process, the Green Normal initiative and the summit, forming a Green Normal coalition. Coalition of the willing to deliver the socioeconomic green services that we mentioned under the principle of the Green Normal. Now, the organizational structure is one that of the committees will form these mechanisms that I have mentioned earlier. To serve the functions of the function. The Pilipinas Kalikasan movement, it is our education cultural partner, social development partner, and in the beginning, yet another group. This is our NGO component. The academy is our think tank component. The academy is our training component, rather. They're the ones who provide training in building our socioeconomic programs. And okay, I think I think I got disconnected and like to reconnect the presentation so I can continue. Let me take a look at how to do that here. Hold on, please. Okay, I hope this works. I'm not sure if... okay, I'm trying to reconnect the presentation. Okay, I hope that works, and I'm trying to reconnect it also in the StreamYard for our live broadcast. Okay, so I think I've managed to reconnect, hopefully. Okay, so going back, as I mentioned, the structures of the Secretariat, besides forming their own structure to serve the work of the party, they will in turn also create new groups similar to them but independent of the party. So the Green Movement partner, Pilipinas Kalikasan, this is already formed and we're already partnering with them. But the rest are basically structures that will be created out of the Secretariat process. The Pilipinas Kalikasan, they will be taking care of the economic program, and from there, this will spin off to another organization that whose job is just to create economic opportunities, green economic opportunities. So the Green Academy is a training coming from our training committee. Our advocacy committee will form the policy center or the think tank. The coalition is is our coalition partner coming from different groups. This will form the summit, the process of the summit will create the coalition. The Green Normal Initiative coming from one of our committee our communication committee will create the Green Normal Initiative, which is a quad media partner. And again, Philippines Kalikasan will form this associative cooperative mechanism for our enterprise development. And of course, the youth core group that is trying to form this. And of course, the core circle, our interim with development. So this is build upon or cater a successor generation. In strategy get back to this so that we can show you the last part of the presentation. Let me work out the presentation as shown in our, okay, here we go. So I have returned the presentation. Okay, so I'm back in the live broadcast in the presentation in our FB Live. So for the last part of this presentation, which is anticipated by many, it is really a question of how are we gonna participate in the 2022 elections. And this is very interesting, and we are still open to discussing this, but our time is running out, so we need to really discuss this soon, and finalize it soon, and move to act on many of these opportunities while they are still with us. Okay, we shall start to engage the first four elections of 2022 to 2028 by promoting our green agenda and fielding our own candidates in local and national position. So tactical for 2022 national and local. In 2022 Barangay and SK election, we will support individual Greens because party is not allowed in the Barangay and SK election. It is a non-partisan election, but there's nothing stopping us from supporting individual Greens indirectly. In 2025, we will focus on local election, midterm, national, and local election. And in 2028, our main concentration is the presidency with a full slate for national and local, as much as we can. We shall implement this by implementing the Green People's Primary Election, our main candidate nomination and selection process, to encourage public participation side by side with active direct participation of party members in selecting our candidates and nominees. Now, what is our assessment of the current situation of how forces are now consolidating for 2022 elections? Our view is this. We think that there is currently three formations. One is the Bongbong Sara tandem, which we believe is a proxy vote for the interests of the Chinese. We also have the Yorme Pacquiao possibility of coming together, which in recent months have shown this possibility with some well-placed media blitz that shows this. So Yorme Pacquiao, we see, is a potential proxy interest of the US in our election, unfortunately. And while the Liberal Party and reformists like former Senator Trillanes or Senator Lacson, and of course the Vice President Lini have shown shown a consistent opposition stand and have pushed for many reforms in our current government. Unfortunately, their interests underlying it, in our view, is also nothing more than the proxy vote of the old oligarchy reacting to the new oligarchy that has been created with the new set of traditional politicians who are currently in power. Our dilemma is that all these three may not be sufficient for what we really need. But clearly, it will again be a plurality because there seems to be three or more. There could be a fourth and a fifth. Not having a unified opposition, if there will be two, three opposition, call to support a single oppressor may be absent. Really, it's interest beyond just human interest, which is where our issues lie as a nature party or ecocentric interest. Current electoral players may not be existent, meaning we don't see any of them understanding nor championing our ecocentric view of looking at politics and what we need to do as a country. In short, there are no Greens in government, not really. And therefore, If this is the situation, the options that are before us are the following. Option one, support a unified opposition. If the opposition represents the real interests of the people, more so the environment, and not just another proxy for self-serving interests whose normal has caused our problems. Proposal is to run to win. Do not run if we don't intend to win in local communities, which is our priority for tactical engagement in 2022. Building this for a green presidency in 2028. Tactical will be the main engagement in national position to gain strategic concession and to support local candidacy. That is what is before us as option one. Option two is to support or to lead a fourth force, a new force beyond these three limited formations that have gathered momentum in the next few months. And today, just this week, we saw one such option for another coalition that is forming. We are monitoring this and see whether this is already what we assume will be a fourth force. In this option, the proposals are to run to win, still building for local community positions, building this for green presidency in 2028, and tactical engagement still for national position to gain strategic concession and support local candidacy. The only difference is that we will be supporting not a unified opposition, but a fourth force. Probably they can refer themselves as the true opposition, which means their interests are not proxy interests of neither the old oligarchy or other countries such as the US and the Chinese. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience, for listening for over 1 hour and 58 minutes, a full 2 hour orientation of Makakalikasan. If you want to be a member, just go to this part of the website and you can apply for membership to join us as Makakalikasan or the Nature Party Philippines. So if there are any questions, I'd like to open the floor now for any discussion if you are still here. If not, and you'd view this later on, you can post in our comment section and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And we would like to invite you in succeeding Sundays to discuss our agenda one by one, all 15 agenda. The format of our process in starting next Sunday will be different. It will now be a policy forum. We will be inviting experts to talk about different aspects of our agenda, and we will use this discussion as a way to clarify, improve our agenda. Thank you. Marami pong salamat din, Professor Nick, at napagtiyagaan ninyo ang ating presentation. Again, this presentation is recorded live and later on, well, this is recorded and live, but later on we will premiere this and it will be shown available online in our YouTube channel, in our other social media, and on our Facebook, so that other people will be able to use this to show to people who may be interested in forming the party. So maraming salamat, and I hope this allows you to better understanding of the party. And again, I have provided the link in the comment section in the Facebook Live in our Facebook page, the link to the PowerPoint that I have just presented. So you will be able to review them more specifically besides this presentation. Maraming salamat po at magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.